Now I'm going to try to show you how to adjust needle position. From idle up until an 1/8 to a 1/4 throttle is going to be controlled by the pilot jet as well as the idle mixture screw. From an 1/8 or a 1/4 throttle up till about 3/4 throttle is primarily going to be controlled by the needle setting. And then from 3/4 throttle to wide open throttle is going to be controlled primarily by the main jet. There are other factors in fuel delivery throughout the throttle range, but the pilot jet, the idle mixture screw, the needle setting, and your main jet are the primary factors that you can actually adjust. You'll want to start out by loosening up the throttle cable so that you've got some slack. Unfortunately, I don't have a stock throttle cable setup. I've got an aftermarket one here. Normally you'd have an adapter that threads onto this, and you would tighten that all the way up against as far as it'll go on the end of the threads here. You may also have some adjusters in the middle of the cable or at the other end of the cable right by your throttle. You might have a nut on the adjuster to lock it in place, so you'd unscrew that. You may need an 8 or a 10 millimeter wrench to get that loose. Unscrew that and then screw them all the way together so you got as much slack as you can create in the throttle cable. And once you've made some slack in the throttle cable, you should have either 1 or 2 screws to take the cap of the carburetor off. That will have some tension on it because of the spring inside. When you pull it apart, you're just going to pull this straight up and out. You'll see there's a gasket in here. It could be an O-ring. Whenever you're doing any of this stuff, always check for those and make sure you don't lose them. Now you can see the whole assembly. This is your needle down here, the throttle valve or the slide, spring to keep tension on it and return the throttle, and then you can see the cable going all the way down through here. And if you look, there's a passageway on the side of this throttle valve, the slide here, and you can see your cable in there and the little barrel on the end of it. And if you look at the bottom, you can see the barrel in the end there. What you'll need to do is take the slide, the black piece here, and push it all the way up against the cap of the carburetor. And when you do that, it should push the cable out the bottom here, and then you'll remove it from this slot on the side. So push it all the way up against there, and then you can see the cable comes out the bottom, and you can move it out this slide on the side and just kind of slide it out. And then there's your throttle valve and needle. Your spring will come off of there. Leave the rest of your assembly together. So now you're going to focus on the throttle valve and the needle here. And if you look down inside, you can see there's a clip inside of there. So you'll need to take a pair of small needle nose pliers and get a hold of that clip. I don't really think I'll be able to show you how you do it, but get a hold of that clip and then pull it out. You're just gripping it like you see here and pulling it out of the way. Put that aside, don't lose it. Then there's another clip, but it's not holding anything. You can just push the needle right up out of the slide. If you take a look at the clip, you should see that one end of it is open. So you take a pair of pliers and grab the side of it that's closed, grip tightly, and then pull the clip up and out of it basically. And there's your clip separate and your needle. You can see here that there's 3 grooves in the needle. The clip can go into any one of those grooves. Raising the needle or installing the clip lower will richen the mixture at part throttle. Lowering the needle or installing the clip higher will lean out the mixture at part throttle. So for example, in this case it was installed in the center groove, and we'll say I want to richen the mixture. So since I want to richen the mixture, I want to raise the needle, which means putting the clip in the bottom position. Go grasp the clip in a pair of pliers, line it up with a groove that you want it in, and then push the needle into there and make sure it's secure on there. Once you've got the clip reinstalled on the needle, you can drop it into the slide in that center hole you can see there. Once that's in place, you're ready to reinstall this clip. So you'll just grip it with a pair of pliers and squeeze it together. When you install it, you'll see that there is a groove in the one side where your throttle cable passes through, and you've got a groove here kind of in the middle of the clip. So you want that groove to line up with that groove when you install it. So just squeeze it and slide it into place down there and make sure it's all the way at the bottom clipped in. Hopefully you can see that it's all the way in there. Once you've got the needle and the clips reinstalled in the slide, then you can start putting the whole assembly back together. You want to start off by making sure you still have the gasket in place on the cap of the carburetor. Then find your spring and slide that over the throttle cable and all the way up against the cap. Now you want to take one hand, compress the spring, use a couple fingers to hold the spring compressed, and leave as much of the cable sticking out as you can. Find the slot down the side of your slide here and kind of insert the cable through there and into this little opening, the round bit you can see there. It should seat into place, and pull it all the way up and through, and then let your spring go into the slide. And that should be complete. When you get ready to install the slide back into the carburetor, you'll notice on one side you should have a couple of little nipples sticking out there, and then you'll have one way down bottom. The one way down bottom should be the idle speed screw, and the two on the side correspond with a groove inside the slide. So if you take another look at the slide, you'll see one side with an open slot all the way down it, and the other side should have a groove and kind of a ramp section at the end, and the ramp section is for your idle speed screw to make contact. So when you install it, this side should go over the side with the two nipples on it, and this side with the ramp will go on the same side as the idle speed screw. You got to be real careful to get those lined up or it's not going to slide all the way in. And again, make sure all your gaskets and everything are intact before you start. So kind of get it started in there. That time it went really easy. Make sure your gasket's lined up. Press it down in place, and then you can start your screws. Keep holding pressure on the cap to keep the spring in place and tighten down the screws. Once you've got the cap screwed back down, you'll need to go over any of the adjusters that you messed with before and take the slack back out of it. So again, you may have one at the carburetor, could have one in the center of the cable, and you'll have one at the other end by the throttle assembly. And make sure you don't take out so much slack that it affects your idle, because if you adjust this too far, then it'll start pulling on the throttle and actually open it up above idle speed. So you want to be careful the first time you start it. And before you ever start it, go to your throttle assembly and make sure you get a full range of motion and that it returns properly, because if it's not in there right, you may start it up and the scooter will be revved wide open and take off on you or something, so you want to be careful with that.